Hello, am I audible, Sona? Okay. Anyways, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So yeah, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the session. So we are going to have few participants today. Very few, as in only 12 participants. Is there any other session that is going on from 9? So if that is the case, then we might have more participants in some time. So okay. Uh, so it is okay. It's not hard time to start only when they come. We can start now. And yeah, so this session is probably the last session of this run of AppDev 1. So so we thought of not keeping it scheduled one, as in something to be planned and said. We thought of keeping it as as open as we can, so that we can have a simple two-way discussion and try to get acquainted with what we try to study in this last 12 weeks, and also try to get some idea on how okay, what are the factors that we need to take care of while preparing for exams. So yeah, many of you might be also busy with submission of final project, which will be on 22nd. So I guess this is fine number still, so we can have a discussion, right? If you have any doubts, any discussion to make, anything that is not clear, we'll try to discuss it here. Okay, so we'll try to keep it as open ended as we can. Yeah, so just give me a minute. Okay, so is there any doubt? Now I see that the discourse is like flooded with some replies, since it is the last part of the course. Yeah, so some are genuine threads students are creating, and some are like okay, okay, no issues. So that is something, it is okay. So yeah, any discussion that we can do on anything that we can try? Yeah, Chaitanya, raise your hand.
Sir, can you explain me the diagram of version control in week 12? I couldn't get that.
Okay, okay, just let me go through it once. Yeah, so is this the diagram?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yeah, see what happens is, this is as you can see on the x-axis we're having time, right? And on the y-axis, we see different stages of an application. Stages as in not the developmental stages, but the stages where it is where exactly it is released, right? Or in what form it is released. Okay, so there are like feature branches, develop, okay, release branches, hot fixes, and master. So as you can see, there are various the dots, the yellow dots, right? There are a lot of yellow dots in the development stage, which is why we are calling it development stage, right? So whenever we are trying to create an application, what we try to release first is the master version of that. Okay, and then from there, after the release, it goes to various developmental stages. Okay, now this, so all these arrow define what is the thing that was coming in the development, or in the process, or in the ongoing time of the application. Okay, so consider that an application got released in its master form. What is master form? The original form which the developer intended to get it come into the market, right? So that is the master form. At this stage, then so that is not it, right? So from there, some developments will happen. Okay, so from there, it will go to development stage. So every application that is released will have ongoing developmental stages in it, right? So those developments are shown with the yellow ones. Now if I see that while working with the application, there is something, let's say there is a functional requirement of an application. Okay, so for example, if we talk about application like messaging app, so what is the functional requirement in that case? The application should be able to send and receive messages from a particular, so it should communication should happen between two users. Now, for some reason, if that functional requirement is not working or not happening in the way the developer intended, that will be a very important fix that needs to be made, right? So that will be a hot fix. Okay, so we are so ultimately it is going to a development stage, but it is coming as a to development in the form of a hot fix. Okay, if the fix is done, there may be two cases. One is, okay, the fix is done, that problem got overcome, right? That the problem that the application was having of not being able to send or receive messages, that can be overcome. If that is done simply, we can come back to our master stage, right? So coming above. Okay, but if in that case, if we are if we cleared that problem and also add some development, it can go to the development stage again. Okay, so this is a fluctuation of application. These are not all these are not the what we say, all different applications, all these blue dots, yellow dots, pink dots. These are the stages of an application starting from master and finally ending up into a master. Okay, ultimately you want an application to remain in the state of master. The latest release of the application with all the bug fixes and all the functional requirements checked and tested, okay, that will be the master. Okay, now for any and if you also see this green dots, these are the release branches. Okay, so this so these are released. So once the development is done, the application is released again. And then if and with the, so these are the versions, various versions that are being released, and once and one of those version can be called as master. So we go back to other the third point, right? So you can so if you are from in 12th standard, we may have studied about various of atom, the structure of atom. So consider this to be the electron, right? A blue dot to be the electron, and this line, okay, the stages, master, hotfix, release branches, develop, and branch features. Consider these to be the orbits in which the electron rotates, right? So it can switch from orbit to orbit. This is a one application. Depending on what is happening with the application, it keeps on switching. Okay, so you may also see that it can go to feature branches all the way down to feature branches. It might remain in the development stage for some time, and it might again come back to the master stage. So this is some a basic what we say, an explanation of this diagram. Is this clear? A bit clear than what it was before?
Yes, sir, it is clear. I just have one more query in this, that
Hmm.
when, say, for example, it has gone from master stage to hotfix stage, so can the end user see the app at that time or not?
No, so that will not be seen by. So see, why do we need a hot fix to that? Okay, this is something that is happening by. So see, I created an application. I will also test it on the test it as an user, right? Right. So how is the problem that this application is not being able to get the functional requirement done? How is it coming to the picture by the use of that application, right? So it will be visible. Okay, but then we internally call it back to the hotfix stage. Okay, so so this happens when an application gets updated. So right, so we have different updates of application. What happened in the background was the bugs of previous version was taken. Some fixes were done, some development was done. If required, branches was released, or if required, or if not required, it was directly led to the master stage back again. Okay, and then that comes up as a update to us.
Okay, sir. Got it.
Okay, and if you also see this, there's a difference between the line that we see various all these orbits, right? If you try to take the analogy of electron, these orbits are light colored, right? So this is where this is happening in the background. Okay, only that we come to know there is a bug. So the developer also comes to know that okay, there is a bug. So the basic version of that application we that needs to be updated. That so when it needs to be updated in the background, some updation happens. Okay, so those bugs remain until we get the updated version. Okay, then it prompts us to update the application. That happens. Okay, other things like feature branches, the development that is happening, the release branches, it depends on the developer what to show. For example, release branches are something that will be available to the end user, but the developmental stages that won't be available because that is not at all required. We don't want to, as a user, I would not want to know what is happening in the background in the development stage. Okay. Hello.
Yes, sir. Got it. Yeah.
Okay, so this is just a simple representation of various stages an application goes from. Okay, that's it. Okay, anyone else has any other doubt related to this part? Okay, fine. Yeah, so we have some more participants. That is good. Right. So any other doubts regarding any other topic? So this is an open-ended, right? So this is an open session where we can discuss topics from any week, right? So no issues.
I have one thing to talk about.
Yeah, sure.
So like we started MVC till week 5. So we started it till week 3, and then we had an review of it in week 5. After that, we never really mentioned it, but it was still being used. So like the overall uh, purpose of us learning MVC was just that, to like relate it to what we are gonna do, or like what was the whole purpose of that. I- I'm like, that's a little doubt that I have.
Yeah. So see, you can relate it with your project, right? So the project that you have created will be following the same pattern. Okay, you have your databases and all the model related things in one place. Okay, you have controllers in one place. Okay, so this is inclusive of APIs. Okay, and then all the templates that you show, all the view functions that you view, not the view functions, or the view files that you create are different, are stored in a different place, right? At the end, what you do is you try to relate these functions by importing the modules here and there. Okay, but what happened is so if I open your code, your source code, or if you open the source code, if you are explaining me your code, okay, I can directly ask you to take me to your controllers, and you can hover through your controllers directly. Okay, you don't need to then segregate, okay, this is my one controller, then from out of nowhere a model comes out, and then out of nowhere you have a view function. That is not happening. You have all these places segregated properly so that you can explain your application, various stages of your application. Okay, so MVC was introduced so that we make use of it and don't even make use of it throughout the course. Okay, and don't even keep saying that okay, now I'm working on the view part, now I'm working on the controller part. That is happening by itself.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so initially, let's say, what could be the other way, right? You would have defined all your models in one page, and also the controllers in a same page. Okay, the same code file, and then used it. Your application would have worked perfectly fine, no issues with that. Okay, it's only that we are not using the design pattern. So this is only design pattern, right? You decide what part of your code or what functionality of your code, what component of your code will come in what part. Okay, so that's why we always say that is MVC the only way of creating application? Absolutely not. Okay, but is this a good way of creating an application? Definitely. Why? Because today, since you have followed the same pattern, you can easily segregate your code into components and explain it to anybody.
So, like we followed the MVC design pattern. So, like keeping the APS part aside, is there something that was against the original MVC that we added upon it?
Oh, okay. Actually, I'm not really sure I got your question.
Let me try to rephrase it.
Hmm.
So, like we studied the MVC design pattern, but then in the lectures, initial lectures, sir said that it's not really a hard and fast rule that we will be following it as it is. So we did a lot of other things as well. So like, is there something that was against the MVC original MVC design pattern that we added, or which was removed or something like that? If
So,
that's the correct
so are
question.
you talking so are you talking about the project or the content?
The content.
No, so content we did not deviate from the original MVC pattern. But see, it's development or application is not only confined to an design pattern. Okay, so we use the design pattern, but there are more to. There is something more to it. That is web, the platform, right? So we chose a platform which we wanted, which we thought would be better at this stage. Okay, starting the application development. Had it been a different platform like a mobile application, there also we had choice of using or selecting any other design pattern. Okay, so the platform is something that is not a part of MVC. Okay, and
Oh, oh.
then yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so that is one thing. And secondly, again, now your application is created. The deployment of application is again not a part of MVC. Doesn't really bother about what design pattern we are using and then finally deploying the application. It could have been any other design pattern, or could have been or would not have been any design pattern at all. Okay, since and still you could have deployed your application easily. Okay. Third thing, we talk about validations, right? So again, validations are something, authentication is something that does not really bother about what design pattern you're using, right? So what I wanted to say here is MVC is part of application that you have developed, and it's not the exhaustive set of that is including everything.
Okay, okay. Mm.
Okay, so so when we went into more details of okay, how should my application be structured? In that case, we thought of something. In that case, we introduced something like design pattern, and the design pattern MVC we chose because it has been tested, and designers or the developers of application have been following it from like a very long time. So we thought of taking that as proper. We thought of continuing with that.
So in AppDev 2 also we will be using the same design pattern.
In so AppDev 2 will not be really bothered about what design pattern you're using. The reason being, the AppDev 2 is more focused on front end. Okay, so we will be more talking more about JavaScript. Okay, how front end is created. Okay, well, how dynamic things are added in the front end, right? So here you may have heard us not favoring JavaScript a lot. Okay, but in
Mhm.
AppDev 2 it will be only JavaScript. Okay, so the major focus of the course AppDev 2 would be the front end. So it does not really matter what design pattern you're using, but since we had that continuum, we'll be going forward with MVC only.
All right,
Okay,
thank
so you may very well be asked or suggested to go with the same app that you have created here, but then work more on front end using JavaScript. Okay, in that case, the entire structure remains as it is because you don't need to really work on it right from the scratch.
you. Okay, okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, any other doubt, other discussion, anything that we can discuss on?
Sir, this is regarding the project that I'm facing a difficulty.
Okay.
It's like, I'm doing the entire thing in the Replit, sir.
All right. Yeah.
And most of the time, the browser is not loading in the Replit when I try running it. What could be the reason?
Okay, so there can be multiple reasons. First, are you providing host?
Yes, sir. I'm providing that app.run host is 000 and debug to port 5000.
Okay, so that is probably the basic thing that happens. Okay. And what is it showing actually?
It runs till it gives a debugger pin, and after that, it's not loading the browser. Like automatically, it will show the home page, right? Like it will go to root/, and it's not loading like that.
So have you defined any endpoint like that, or you have
Yeah, I have
added?
defined the endpoint and everything.
No, endpoint with the home or what we say a root root.
App.root/ I've defined as home, and I've rendered a page.
Okay.
Home HTML.
Okay, so see what might be happening is so what this happens when we try to run multiple applications using the same port or same host.
Okay.
Yeah, so you may have, so we do this a lot of time while testing a question or creating a local application, a solve with instructor sessions, all those things. We have all these files there in our system, right? And everyone using the same host and same port. Okay, but for if any reason, if any of the port stays on, then there are conflicting application working on the same host and port. So that might be one of the reasons. What you need, what you can do is try to close all the applications that you think can be running, and secondly, try to open the same thing in incognito mode.
Okay, I mean, the browser I should open in incognito mode, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The same Replit application will have its own link, right? You try to open that link in a incognito mode.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so if that works, it will be fine. If that does not work, just send the screenshot of what problem you're facing on the Discord, right?
Okay, sir. Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any other doubt? Okay, no doubt. Okay, so just wanted to ask, how many of you have completed project? You're not waiting for 20 seconds to come. Since yeah, so since 18 has been the deadline for a very long time, it is only recently that we have changed it to 22. Such a revision session. Okay, what exactly you want to talk about in revision session? See, the reason being, we have not planned any such session for now. The reason being, we have taken 2 sessions separating each of it in different parts, right? So we had so right before quizzes. Okay, and so I'm not saying that the weeks coming further are not really important. It is, so those are very important weeks, but still the most of the coding part that we the practical aspect of this course gets covered in from week 1 to week 9. So these are the weeks that you really need to focus on as far as the end term or any exam for that matter is concerned, right? For any, so if there is any requirement of revision session, we'll try to see if there is a way we can do that. Yeah, but you can consider this session also as a it will be in the revision session also. What we'll do, we'll take you through the entire content of the weeks. That's it. It would be better if we try to solve any personalized specific doubt. In that case, we can have a more targeted discussion.
Sir, I had a query.
Yeah.
Sir, I had submitted a brief project on 17, but now when I'm going to the portal, I cannot see any submit option and it is showing due date exceeded.
Okay, yeah, so that is something which is from the portal side. If you have made your submission, it would have been recorded in the backend. Okay,
But if I
so
again have to submit it because now the due date is 22nd.
yeah, so that date will be changed. That will be updated.
Okay.
Okay, so since it is only 1 day after the submission, so we are still in the process of um, uh, uh, taking out or calculating what are the submissions that we have received. Okay, the time and the submissions. So once that is done, we will update the submission, the last submission date to 22.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so currently it shows only 18th.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that will be the case, because see, if we change the submission now before confirming that how many of you all have submitted, then the submission link for the previous submission gets extended. Okay, so that we do not want. Once we are done with the all the data processing in the backend, we'll change the date, update it to 22.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so yeah, so there are general doubts on video uploading. See, the reason we have given 3-minute window is that we have a good experience of seeing that a video and all the components of an application can be easily completed within 3 minutes. Okay, and second reason is it unnecessarily puts a lot of burden on database, because even this 3-minute video becomes very long one, or yeah, as far as the size is concerned. Okay, so if we try to extend 20 seconds, then somebody would come up and ask, if you're extending 20 seconds, why not 1 minute? Okay, so that keeps on escalating there. So we therefore want to hardly stick on 3-minute window. And as I already have given or said or have given in any other document regarding video uploading, we what we want is for you to just give a quick walkthrough of your application. Okay, you don't need to give any explanation as in how these things are done, or what you have done. That is something that will keep for your Viva. Okay, that will be a detailed 1 hour Viva where we can ask you line by line. But here it is something, it is like you showing an application to your friend. Okay, so how is this application, how it runs, and what are the features? That's it. Okay, so in that case 3 minutes is more than sufficient. Okay. Okay, so since video has to be the link for video has to be submitted on 22nd, and I'm sure like so many of you may have not yet recorded it. These are certain instructions. Okay, so try not going above 3 minutes, firstly. Secondly, while recording, your face should be visible, your camera should be on. Okay, so it should be somewhere around bottom right or bottom left or wherever you want, but it should be on. Okay, the video without face will not be accepted, because for very obvious reasons that you may not be the one that is representing the video. Okay, so we don't want that to happen. Yeah, so for dates of Viva, made open to booking slots very soon. Okay, where you can book your slots. So it will be according to your slots. Okay, so I cannot give you the exact dates for now because it is changing because of the slots and all. So yeah, so we'll give a confirmed thing when the slot booking will be available.
Sir, will it be after the end term or before that?
Uh, it will be before the end.
All right.
Sir, in making the video, we should run the app and explain the things, right? Along with the place where we can record our video also. I thought it's like we have to record a screen.
Sorry, see, what you need to do is it's like me presenting something, right? So your screen should have the interface of your application, and your face should be available in a small screen somewhere on the main screen,
Okay.
right? So yeah, and about the app, it should be running. Yes, you have to keep your app running because how will you give the walkthrough of your application? You want the running application being explained by you. Okay,
Okay.
so that is the reason we did not ask for video now, because we know that, yeah, now as in yesterday, because we know that the application might not as well be completely running or completely finished. So the final video uploading has to be done once your application is finished, that you're okay with, okay, this is what I could have done. So then only your video should be there. Okay, project report. Yeah, it should be. It will be good if you give a PDF. Okay, because there is formatting issues with docs. Okay, so it would be good if you give a PDF. 2-page PDF would be good. Yeah, that's what. So PDF would be good. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So no more doubts regarding any concept. Okay, so okay, what I'll try to do is I do not currently have any written text where I could show things, but yeah, so just just a kind of walkthrough I'll do with all the weeks. Okay, so what things should be kept in mind for studying for this week? Just give me a minute, okay? Okay, so I will take you through this, some of the contents of our weeks, and we'll try to have simple discussion on this. Okay, so is my screen visible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So these are the slides that we have created for the a bit revision. So this is not so detailed. That's why I was not trying. I was not going through it. But okay, let's have a quick look on this slides. Okay, yeah. So this is the basic content of week one. Okay, so in the week one, we generally saw what is an application in general, right? So we started with the definition of application. Yeah, so Sachin, this will be kind of revision session. Okay, so you can consider this to be a part of revision. I'll try to give you idea of all the weeks and its contents and how what things are important. Okay,
Okay, sir.
so so let me continue with this. Yeah, so the first thing that we saw is the application in general. So in general, meaning it doesn't have to be a web application really. It can be any application using any other platform. For example, it can be an Android application, mobile web application, as well as the standalone application that we have in our own laptop or systems that we don't need to really need to connect to the web. Okay, so it can be any application. Then as I said, our main focus was to have web application, because web applications are heavily network dependent, and then they can work across OS and devices, right? So we really need a link, not the installation of application. Okay, and then we talked about various components of web app. Okay, so so till now we had not known or had not seen the word MVC. Okay, so how we really put it otherwise, that is storage, computation, and presentation. Okay, now if you read these three words, you can relate to you can relate to individual word of these individual this word with MVC. Okay, what can be what. Okay, then as I said, there can be other application platforms. Okay, and one of those is the web based, okay, that we have taken as the main part of this course. Okay, then we talked about various architectures. Okay, and those are client server and peer to peer. So this client server architecture is something that we looked upon when we studied web architectures in various details. Okay, and this is something that we'll be using uh, for a lot for the major part of this course. Okay, for peer-to-peer network, we thought of other examples like BitTorrents, right? So these are the applications that use peer-to-peer network. Okay, and then finally we came up with architecture pattern or software design pattern called as MVC. Okay, so what the M of MVC does, it takes care of the storage part, right? The V, that is view, that takes care of the presentation part, and the controller that takes care of the computation part. Okay, and there is a small picture of client server web architecture here on the right. Okay, so jumping onto the web, we saw why the web is platform for this choice for various reasons, right? Then we once the platform was confirmed, then we got into the details of web, and then with the details we got with the various we started off with the history of networks and stuff, right? So we thought of historical background of networks, where we talked about telephone network, packet switch network. Okay, so these are something that you really need to just have a look at. Okay, you don't need to learn these things by heart, because we won't be asking any theoretical based questions. Okay, this course is more of coding based course. Okay, logic based course, so we won't be going into much of the theory. Absolutely, though there won't be theory, absolutely no, there can be some components of theoretical, but you don't need to go into lot detail. Okay, then you need to go in the history background, so you can go to the background of web. Okay, in web we saw various protocols. Okay, then we also talked about how internetwork as a word came, how we first saw the word internet. Okay, and then finally with the terms like internet protocol, transmission control protocol, and then finally the domain names. Okay, and then we talked about other things like World Wide Web and its evolution, and then a very important thing, that is an HTTP, okay, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Okay, so this is something that we have been using. Okay, and how are we making request to a particular URL? With the help of curl, right? So we saw a simple server that was being created, and with the help of curl we saw, okay, this is something that the this particular URL returns. Okay, and then we thought of other, so this is something that is including the numerical part, where we talked about performance parameters of web, right? The response size, latency, what we say, size of the request, right? Speed of the server and things like that. So we saw various numericals based on that. Okay, moving ahead, we came up with the things like markup. Okay, then we thought of various representation. Okay, the how information is represented, how it is interpreted, what is the context of information. Okay, so that was something that we talked about. Okay, we saw the differences between raw data and semantics. Okay, and then we also saw things like the difference between logical structure and styling. Okay, and with these things like DOM came into picture. Okay, so this is the first time where we saw what is document object model. We did not really go into details of document object model and why exactly it is used, but this is somewhere, this is something where we introduced concepts of document object model. Okay, and then we finally came up with a better markup, or the markup that we will be using, that is HTML5. Okay, and how HTML5 has has a very good responsive design, and not the responsive design, how responsive nature it brings to our web application. That is something that we saw with HTML5 and CSS. Okay, CSS is the very basic styling concept that we brought, and then we saw like other alternatives to CSS, and with that we talked about frameworks like Bootstrap. Okay, and other like Tailwind CSS extractor, and then we very briefly saw what is JavaScript, right? But now, as I said, JavaScript will be more, more thought of or more seen in detail in the application development 2 course. Okay, so we can wait till then. Next is the views. Okay, so what is exactly view? This is the views of MVC design pattern, right? So what it takes care of, it takes care of the presentation part of our application. Okay, so we, as I said, we have used MVC design pattern. So view stands for view, v in that, so v in that MVC stands for view. Okay, then we saw various types of view, like fully static, partly dynamic, and mostly dynamic. Okay, we do not have anything like fully dynamic, right? So we also saw that. And then we saw things like user interface design. Okay, where the main focus was on aesthetics and accessibilities, various accessibility guidelines, accessibility principles, the tools like wireframes, HTML generation, templates. Okay, this is something that we saw in views. So this is a part of week 3. Yeah, so finally, when we wanted our data to get stored somewhere, we introduced the term models. Okay, so within models, we this is where the database was brought. Okay, so this is an energy, not the energy, the entity relationship diagram, diagram, what we call it, as taken in week 4 is shown. Okay, so this gives us various relations between two different entities. How are they related, and what is the relation that they share? Okay, that is something that we saw in models. Okay, so this is where we talked about databases. Okay, this is where we introduced database management system for the very first time in this course. Okay, then we saw various mechanisms for persistent storage, that is in-memory data structures. Okay, relational databases and unstructured databases, right? So SQL and NoSQL. Okay, and as I said, we majorly talked of two relations, that is one to many and many to many. Okay, and then some basic SQL being thought of. Basic SQL was learned just to get handy with how the queries and all works in databases. Yeah, so next is the very important part, or the major part of MVC, that is the controller. How are you designing your business logic is something that is taken care of by controllers. Okay, so as it is written, controller is a link between user and the system. Okay, so this is something that that brings about a link between the one that is using the system and the one that is running the system exactly. Okay, so this is something that we saw in controllers. Okay, the major part that we do using any controller are the CRUD operations, right? So even in this project that we are working on, in the project that we saw in the all the lab assignment, what basically we saw was how CRUD operations are created with the help of controllers, and how are they manipulated, and certain changes are done. Okay, how did we make changes in the database by creating some entities, okay, reading or retrieving data from the database, updating those entries and deleting those entries. This was the major task of creating any application. Now we developed a business logic which uses this operation and get the things done. Okay, so that is something that we saw in controllers. Okay, and then we introduced a very basic framework, a very friendly framework for web development, that is Flask. Okay, and then we again in the Flask, while defining an application, we saw how basic routing is done. Okay, yeah, then finally once we got acquainted with the concepts of how web application is created using the Flask framework, we introduced something like REST architectural style, right? So here is this is place where we introduce distributed software architecture, the one that we saw earlier, that is peer to peer. Okay, and we first saw what APIs are. Okay, and then we again talked about what is REST. Okay, so it is a representational state transfer which provides guidelines, or what we call as constraints. Okay, that takes into consideration the limitations of web. Okay, so based on limitations of web, REST defines some guideline which has to be followed while creating REST APIs. Okay, so these are the constraints that we saw, and then finally we talked about various HTTP methods in details. Okay, what all HTTP methods that we have utilized in our application, and how are they working in our application, what are their limitations, and what is the use of each, and how is one different from the other. Okay, so this is something that we saw in REST and APIs. Okay, moving ahead. Yeah, so when we talked about HTTP methods, we defined certain characteristics like idempotent operations, okay, and safe operations. What is idempotent HTTP method? What is a safe HTTP method? Things like that. Okay, and then the basic data structure of any API that we talked about is the JSON. Okay, because this is something that an API returns. It can return anything, but this is something which is most preferable, which can be easily manipulated, and easily data can be easily retrieved or targeted using a JSON file. Okay, then we thought of okay, once the APIs are created, we thought of documenting them, and that is done with the help of YAML, right? So we created YAML file which was able to configure an API. Okay, which would allow us to give a UI based something which will not only ask us to give certain inputs, and also it returns certain expected outputs from the API. So that is how we documented API. Okay, and then finally we used this concept of REST in the APIs. Okay, and as I said, we used UIs like Swagger and other, what we say, Insomnia, things like that, for open API documentation. Okay, so this is something that we saw till week 6, right? Anything that is out of the box here? I guess everything that I said is something which which you could recall and think, okay, yeah, this is something that we saw. Right, I hope this gave you a clear idea of what was being taught in each as the content of each week.
Yes, sir.
Okay, right, so I'll move ahead with the next part of this thing. Yeah, so the slides are visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So week 7 is where we introduce backend system, right? So this is something that gives us an idea of what happens, what exactly happens at the server side. Okay. And then while working with the server, we talked about various storage elements, or what we say the components of a server, of the system, of the server system, where we talked about storage elements, storage parameters like latency, throughput, density. Okay, and then computer organization, we saw various numericals on this, right? You might have seen the slides also. Okay, so we saw various other numericals, that or various types of numericals that can come in. Okay, and then we briefly introduce cold storages, that is what are the properties of a cold storage, what are its uses, and also some examples of cold storage were seen. Okay, and in the application development we saw, now that we were working with the structure of server, this is where how this is the place where we saw how a server manipulates the memory or the database. Okay, so for that we talked about various algorithmic complexities that will be that will reduce our burden in sorting out certain elements from the database. Okay, and then other alternatives like binary search trees, indexing. Okay, and then this is where we made use of SQL and NoSQL, right? And also certain relational database and alternatives were given. Okay, how what are the relational database, what are their alternatives? Okay, how data can be stored like document databases, graphs, and others. Okay, and individual example of each was given. Okay, then we talked about various asset properties, that is the properties that a database should comply with. Okay, and then we saw finally how an application is, application can be scaled. What are the terms that should be taken care of while scaling an application? Okay, what are the types of scaling of application? Okay, we may have come across terms like vertical scaling and horizontal scaling, right? So these are the two things that we saw in scaling. Okay, so overall this is something that these are the things that we saw in backend systems. Okay, then we came to application front end. Okay, so this slide is the base core of application development too. Okay, so this is where we will talk about JavaScript a lot. Okay, because as you can see, the content of application front end also, what are we seeing here? We're talking about front end mechanisms. Okay, how a view is created using the technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so what are the functional reuse frameworks? Okay, what are the frameworks that will create functional reuse? Okay, what are the load implications? Obviously, so when when we talk about client side loading and server side loading, why was there a need to create two different types of loading? What was their impact? Okay, what was the impact of application or a web page being loaded in the front end, that is in the at the client side or at the server side? What was the result? What was the effect of these loading on the server? Okay, or on the, or as a whole running of an application, right? So this is where we saw load implications. Okay, then moving on to more more interactive pages, we saw from as basic as fully static pages to pages which were which are done or at runtime, right? So dynamic pages. Okay, so this is something that we will be seeing in application front end. And then yeah, so as I said, why was there a need to create two types of rendering? Well, that is one client side rendering and server side rendering. Okay, so these two types are created so as to reduce load of one, reduce the load of client from the server, or reduce the load of server from the client. And then we brought about certain trade-offs, like what should be used to what extent, so that there is there is a compromise between both, and then we have an application running at its optimal speed. Okay, this is the point where we talked about JavaScript in details, right? So in details as in so we did not really talk, but this is where the JavaScript plays a better role or more detailed role. Okay, so we talked about asynchronous updates using Ajax, DOM manipulation. Okay, So these are the things, or these are the places where JavaScript will have its all more impact. Okay. And then various browsers and clients, JavaScript engines, machine clients, native mode, all these that we saw in application front end. Okay. And then there was concepts like sandboxing, right? So which allows only certain part of our machine to, to have access to the JavaScript, so that it does not really, play around with our local files. Okay. So so this is something that is related to security. That's why we have sandboxing security implications. Okay. So if you move ahead, yeah, so this is where we talk about security. We talk about various access control. Okay, what are the types of access control? What are web-based mechanisms that take care of security? Okay, what are sessions? What is the S in HTTPS? Adding of external extras letter there. Okay, so till now we saw about HTTP, and then now we are looking at HTTPS. So this is something that talks about security. Okay, and then finally we talked about logs and analysis. This is done for the very reason that because we want to know what is actually happening with the application. Okay, server logging, application level logging. Why do we have logging at the first place? To understand what is actually happening at the background. Okay, so this is this logging we see at our console. Okay, so this is something that we talked in the security. Yeah, so we talked about various parts of or components of access control, like discretionary and mandatory, role based access control, attribute based access control. Okay, and then we talked about policies and permissions. Okay, and principle concepts like principle of least privilege and enforcing. Okay, so this is till here it was done till week 8, right? This was the content of quiz 1 and quiz 2 combined, but this is something that we will see in end term. This is a part of m term along with those two parts, right? So this is one, that is security. Next we talk about testing. Okay, so what is application testing? What are the types of application testing, right? We saw all these things in detail. Then we saw various levels of testing. Things like requirements gathering. Obviously, requirement gathering are something that is required at the initial stage of developing application, because this is where we would these things would direct us to what kind of application we are creating. Okay, then we segregated out the functional and non-functional requirement, because there is, in that case, we can focus on what should be done. Okay, and our focus should be on the functional requirements rather than non-functional requirements. So that is what I would suggest you all to do for your project also. You segregate out what is functional and what is non-functional, and try to focus on functional requirement. For example, and this is the very reason we have kept aesthetics as optional. Why? Because it is a non-functional requirement. Minimal aesthetics are definitely accepted and will be liked by everyone. Okay, appreciated by everyone, minimal aesthetics, but completely looking at aesthetics of the application and not being able to complete the functional requirement is something that we are not looking at. Okay, so this concept is can be useful for developing your application also. Okay, then we talked about various levels of testing, like unit testing, integration testing. So these things: unit testing, integration testing, system level testing, system automation, user acceptance testing. All these testings are written in their order, what should be done first, right? So you can see that. So if you are creating an application, you are creating let's say an architecture of an application. The basic thing that you need to test first is the unit of that application. Then you should look after how these units work together, so that comes under integration testing. Okay, now integration testing will make a module, but now you need to check all other modules that creates the system. Okay, then in that case, that comes out to be that is taken care of by system level testing. Okay, and then finally you should test the automation of that system, if there is any. Okay, and then finally, once your application is tested, you should look after how users are accepting it, how users are looking at your application, what things do they find interesting, what they found problematic, right? So this is user acceptance testing. And then we have broader concepts like model based testing. Remember, this model is not the model of MVC. Okay, as I have explained in the previous sessions also. Then finally, see, so here we talked about GUI and security testing. Okay, so if you leave out security testing, GUI testing is something that is a part of non-functional. Okay, so so graphical user interface, right? So you test whether your interface is working just fine. Okay, and then finally you have security implications that you test. Okay, so this is all that we saw with the help of within the week testing. Okay, and then finally we dealt with a Python framework called PyTest, which gives us the idea of how testing is done. Simple testing is done on our Python modules that we are creating. Okay, so if I move ahead, yeah, so till here this is something, probably the last part of your application, right? If you want to create an application with the contents of, if you go through the sequence of contents of the week, you will see testing is the last part. Okay, now we'll talk about that is something that is adding more to our application, right? So we created our front end, we created our web pages, our views with the help of basic HTML, right? So we use HTML5 because now that is the latest and probably the most equipped markup, right? But we also saw some evolution, right, from the scratch, right? How this markup languages initially came into picture, and then how did we landed up in HTML5. Okay, but really, is that it, right? That was the question that was asked in this week, right? But so what was done later, right? So this is where we talk about JavaScript, and that's why we are talking about, that's why we are involving JavaScript as a major part of front end. Okay, because this takes care of all the dynamic nature of the application. Okay, which is beyond the capability of HTML. Okay, now, JavaScript is a programming language which you want to create only once, right? You want to use that code and again and again. That is the reason we have things like components. Okay, that is the reason we have things like frameworks of JavaScript. Okay, so you want to create a code, but you don't want to keep writing it again and again just to bulk up your page, right? You just want to reuse it, and that is the reason, or that is the place where JavaScript frameworks come into picture. Okay, so these are all from front-end frameworks like React.js, Angular, Vue, and Ember. Okay, in application development too, you will be mostly looking at Vue.js. Okay, so this is something that we saw in week 11. And finally, the last week content was application deployment. So this is where you have your application completely ready, but now you want your application to be used by other users, right? You want your application to be used at a large scale, but you really don't want to, run it on the local host. So this is where you deploy your application for others to use, giving it a proper domain name and URL. Okay, so yeah, so but with the deployment we start off with very basic thing that we have in application development, that is the so it starts with scratch, right? So we first have the idea, then we do it then we develop the application on locally within our machine, that is single computer, and then we provide into multiple services, and then finally we look at permanent deployment where you don't need to keep your machine on 24/7, right? And then we talk about, so now your application is ready and you want it to be used by a certain number of users, and certain number of users are using it, no issues. Now you want more people to join in and use your application. This is where scaling comes into picture, right? So we talked about scaling in backend also, week 7. Okay, now application deployment and application development are also provided by various approaches, like various service approaches, right? So how do you approach your application as in, you want to create application, what do you really need? Do you really need only the system to create it? Do you need the exact the complete environment to create it, the complete infrastructure to create it, or only the platform? So this is where things like SaaS, IaaS platform, and PaaS things come into picture, right? So software as a service, you need only the software to create your application, go with software as a service. But you need no, the software is not enough. You need the entire infrastructure, your connection with databases, servers, and things like that. You need infrastructure as a service. And then if you want only platform, so let's say web, right? Our platform is web, so you need only web to create our application. You can go along with platform as a service. Okay, and then finally we talked about, once the application is deployed, we talked about version controls. Okay, so version control, application deployment, your application doesn't stop at that stage. You want certain developments to happen in an application, certain updates to come in into the picture based on the user experiences, right? So this is where version control comes into picture. And there are other terms like containers and orchestration. Okay, containers are like a small piece of software, a small piece of a software environment that allows you to create an application, right? Like virtual machines. Okay, and what is orchestration? Orchestration is nothing but combination of all this environment so that they work in harmony. That is the reason we are calling it orchestration. Okay, so these are the terms that we saw in application deployment, and these are terms, or these slides briefly encompass the entire course as a part, what you need to look at for each week content, so as to make yourself a good developer and exam ready too. Okay, yeah, so with this I end the slides. Is there any doubt? Yeah, so I'll be sharing the slides with you all, no issues. Okay, so this was the overview of overview of the entire course, which we want you to look at and have a have the entire course at a glance. Okay, so there is a question, since Viva will be before end term and there will also be general questions apart from project, what would be the syllabus for same? Yeah, so the current entire 12 weeks, right? So we'll be focusing on all the 12 weeks content, and the slides that I've shared now will be very helpful in understanding what should be looked at for Viva. Yeah, so it will be again a combination of theory and coding questions both. We can ask you to write a small code. Okay, given the time constraint, we also have certain time constraint where we need to take care of everything. So if at all we are asking coding questions, it will be very meager, very small. But yes, you can expect coding questions. Okay, so is there any doubt? Shall we keep it open? Anyone can unmute and ask it out.
Sir, would we be learning about the implementation of peer-to-peer architecture in MAT too?
Implementation of peer-to-peer architecture, I'm not really sure, but currently I do not have any what we say, I do not have any evidence where you will learn that in AppDev 2.
Okay.
So I don't think so, but if it is introduced, if we try to change, so see what happens every time we might since AppDev 2, it was the very first one of AppDev 2, there can be something that can be added or removed. So if that is done later, that will be communicated.
Yeah, it really helps, like if we get to know the implementation as well. Like theory is good and all, but like with implementation, the horizon of imagination expands a lot. Like we really get to know that this thing is possible. Like we can build a lot of things.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so see what happened, that's what I said, right? So when I talked about architectural pattern, right, like client server or peer-to-peer, I focused on client server because that is something that we have been doing the entire course. Okay, we did not really focus on peer-to-peer, and as MAT 2 is focusing more on front end, I'm not really sure if that is covered, but when we try to introduce certain things into the course, that can come in, okay, which I'm not currently sure of, right? So if that's something like that comes in, it will be pretty clear to you as the syllabus.
Okay, sir. And like in general, feedback, like the lab assignments were really useful. So
yeah,
if like they would have been there for like even for weeks after week 7, like would be like the knowledge comes to good use when you implement the stuff. Without implementing, it's not of much use.
Yeah, that's
So
what.
like
So
for
yeah, even in the discourse, if somebody was asking me what kind of question should we refer for quiz to, I also put an emphasis on lab assignments, because that was somewhere you yourself did things, right, instead of simply answering. So yeah, so it is helpful, I understand, and we are thinking of it, because uh, since we can do that, we are only thinking of, okay, what should be the part, if at all we are adding, because the contents of other weeks, like coming weeks, like week 8 and security and testing, this is something that we really don't think can come as a part of lab assignments, but we can come up with more assignments in the future.
yeah.
See, you want a lab assignment, but for that a content should qualify for being an assignment. Okay, since we are talking about mostly theoretical part, uh, I'm not really sure what can be added, but we are okay. We are in discussion in for that too, whether to add more lab assignments or not. We'll see.
And also, sir, like I got to know a few things about my friends who are doing some internships. Like they said that people use something called SOAP APIs there. So, like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this. So as you had asked, in somebody had asked, right? The alternative to REST APIs. Okay, so this was the word that came into my mind, but I could not really speak. So SOAP APIs are an alternative, not an alternative, are primitive to REST APIs. Okay, so initially we had SOAP APIs. Okay, then we came up with REST APIs, and then now we have things like jQuery.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
so these are all advancements.
Okay, so the rest is the advancement from SOAP.
Yeah. So initially it was in picture SOAP.
Okay,
Okay,
sir.
so you can find articles in stating the difference between SOAP and REST. Let me see if I can find one. But okay, but yeah, you can easily find articles stating the differences between SOAP and REST. Okay, but
Okay.
REST is something that we can that we are using, and things like,
Sure, sure.
say, okay, REST APIs. Hmm. Yeah, so yeah, so one misspell from my side. I said jQuery, right? So it is not jQuery, it is GraphQL. Okay, I got confused. So the alternative of
Okay, sir.
REST that we are using, that can be used here, is GraphQL. Okay, but
Okay, sir.
REST is okay. Yeah, so this is one of the links that I found, but there was one properly accepted link that I'm not really finding now, but I will try to put it on Discourse. Okay, that brings out a table which gives proper differences between the SOAP and REST.
Okay, sir.
Okay, fine. Yeah, so the slides that I have presented now, I will be putting it on either Discourse on or portal. Okay, both, I can put it there. Okay, anything else?
So I was unable to find the solutions of quiz 2. it was mentioned in the announcement that they have been released, but like apparently they're like I couldn't like, find them.
Quiz 2
So,
solutions.
yeah.
Okay, I'll check with the portal. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there was one question about JavaScript. So like there was some code given about JavaScript, and like they have to find the output, something like that. I don't remember. Yeah. So like
yeah. So we are actually going through all the questions. Okay, reconsidering whether a question can be asked or not. Okay, if by any chance we found that by any chance we find that this question should not be asked, we'll have the revaluation. Okay, but this is under discussion.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
Okay, so I hope I gave a brief idea where you can go through the slides and get the content of each week all together. Okay, so this will also help you in preparing for end term exam, because the content that I've given in the slides are a reflection of what can be asked. Okay, the topics that can be taken into consideration while creating through the solutions of lab assignments. Okay, because that is something major coding questions can be developed on, right? So lab assignment is something that it will be like a digest that you should revise before any exam. Okay, anything else? Okay, so I'll wait for 1 or 2 minutes. If there are any doubts, you can simply unmute or post it in chat. Otherwise, if there are no doubts, I think it will be good to wind up the session. Okay, I'll wait for a minute. Suyesh, what exactly you're trying to ask? Still buggy as in? What you meant is if it is still not running anywhere, not able to run it before 18th or something like that. So you're submitting the first draft, but it is not, you're not able to run it properly. What will happen then? What is it what you're asking? Yeah, so no issues. We would just want to see your development. Okay, so what happens generally, people ask for deadline extension, but start working on last 2 days. We will go through your codes and see what stage your application is at. Okay, that is the reason we have asked you to also give a small document which states, okay, this is what your application currently works like, and what are the things you are looking forward to add in coming 4 days, right? So therefore a document was asked for the same. So it doesn't have to be a full proof running application. Code base is something that will give us idea whether a student is working on it or not.
Sir, actually, I made the whole code. I have given 4 trackers in the application, and the login page, the registration page, these 2 pages are working fine. The data that I'm entering in the registration page for a new user, it is being stored in the database, SQLite database itself as well. because whenever I'm trying to log in with the same username, it always redirects. The way I've given the functionality is that if the user has logged in already and if he goes by mistake to the login page, he will be redirected to the dashboard without any other further check-ins. So that should work because it actually is working that way. The only problem is that build.workzoic.something, that kind of build error is coming, saying that the dashboard is not buildable. And they're saying that you must have not passed the user parameter, while I actually have. I've checked the whole code from top to bottom and it still doesn't make sense how it is not loading the dashboard page of that HTML. So that is why I'm asking if the uh, working code is necessary or is just that the code base was necessary.
Yeah, so see, working code is necessary in the final submission. Okay, because that will be evaluated against the core requirement. Okay, for any reason you are not being able to do it before this submission, but still can find out a way in coming 3 to 4 days, that will be no issues, that will be fine. Okay, so here we will not be evaluating you based on your code. Okay, so this is not working and that is not working. This will submission is to check what kind of functionalities are being added at what stage your application is. Okay, so that's why I said it doesn't have to be really working from foolproof, fully running. You might as well, for some reason have some bugs here and there, but this is what is expected to get clear in coming 3 to 4 days.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
And what if there are further bugs that I encounter? Where should I exactly go? Discourse is the only place, or I can go elsewhere and get them solved.
See, there is no stopping you. You can take some help from outside for that particular part, right? So we will not ask you to, completely do it by yourself. You, anybody can get stuck at any point of time, and that can be very, a trivial issue. But that can, if that is affecting the entire project, that a small help can be taken. Okay. So either Discourse will help you, or if you have some friends working outside, you can take their help. No issues.
Okay, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, so again, I'll wait for a minute. If there are no other doubts, we'll wind up. Okay, so it looks like there are no more issues or currently at this stage. So if it is okay, we can wind up the session, right?
So
Yes,
just
sir.
one thing before we wind up. Yeah. So would we be learning anything about blockchain in general in the whole diploma or anything like that?
What exactly?
Would we be learning anything about blockchain in the upcoming courses of or any of them?
Sorry, Sachin, I don't have any idea about
that. Okay, sir.
Okay, so as I said, some things if can be added to Mat2, that will be later communicated, but currently I do not have idea about that.
Okay.
Okay, I guess this is it now. I'll share the slides, okay, on the Discourse or put it on the portal itself. I hope it was helpful, and probably we'll wind up the session now. Okay, so I would not want to waste your much time. You can start working or continue working on your project and also on the end term content. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for joining the session, and yeah, so we'll call it a day.
Thank you, sir.